Danger, danger! 2 flags are up. Be careful! If there is a 3rd flag, that will be the signal to evacuate. A cyclonic depression has formed over the Bay of Bengal. The alarm has just been sounded in the village in South Bangladesh. The winds are already blowing at more than 100 kilometers an hour. The national radio station broadcasts news every half hour. We are at signal 6. We have to prepare. At signal 7, we'll have to evacuate the population to the anticyclonic shelters.
According to the news, signal 7 could be given. The cyclone may hit the region around Cox's Bazar tonight, but it might still turn towards Orissa in India. There is really a heavy wind. We have to go to the shelter. I'm taking a few things over there.
This time, the cyclone will turn toward India and the alert will be lifted. Twice a year, before and after the summer monsoon, the cyclones hit the coastal region of Cox's Bazar in South Bangladesh. People here say that Cox's Bazar has the world's longest beach. For the past 20 years, the beaches have drawn thousands of landless peasants who fish for shrimp larvae, destined for breeding. The fishermen call the larvae the white gold of Bangladesh. In the Cox's Bazar region, 2 million people earn a living from the sea. The poorest live on the beach itself. With no protection or information, these are the first victims of the cyclones. Since 1970, cyclones in Bangladesh have killed more than 500,000 people. The Cox's Bazar Meteorological Centre dates back to the time of the British colonization. Its scientists are now able to predict how a cyclone develops and where it is most likely to hit. They do this by analyzing every day the speed and direction of the winds, as well as the temperature and the moisture levels. Bangladesh is situated between India and the Indo-Chinese peninsula. Cyclonic depressions always form above the Andaman Islands in the Bay of Bengal. They then move north, reaching the eastern coast of India or Bangladesh in 4 to 6 days. Despite the weather forecast, on the night of the 29th of April 1991, 140,000 people were killed during the 2B cyclone.
We knew that this cyclone had been formed and it was heading towards the south coast of Bangladesh. It was to hit heavily the coastal area. We informed the population through TV and radio. Those who stayed at home in spite of warnings died.
140,000 people died and millions were left homeless. That night, the winds blew at more than 300 kilometers an hour. Along with the 2B cyclone came tidal waves, which completely submerged the islands close to Cox's Bazar. All the rice paddies were destroyed and the livestock were decimated. The cyclone was the world's deadliest natural disaster in 20 years. The island of Kutubdia was one of the hardest hit in 1991. 1/3 of its 120,000 inhabitants died, swept away by the tidal waves. Today, the survivors are getting on with everyday life again. Kutubdia is well known for its dried fish, which is exported to Japan, amongst other places. The island is 17 kilometers long and 5 kilometers wide. Inland, the farmers have rebuilt their irrigated rice pads. Like everywhere else in Bangladesh, rice is a staple food. The village of Tablachar is situated at the far southern end of the island. Tablachar appears to be isolated. There is no electricity here. However calm it may seem, no one here has forgotten the 1991 cyclone. In Tablachar, every one of the 10,000 survivors has lost at least one member of their family. Fear of the cyclone is part of everyday life.
It was very fast. In a few minutes, everything was under the water. An enormous tidal wave took away everything. Trees, animals, people, bodies were floating everywhere. I was not able to save my mother. I tried to hold on to her, but the heavy current took her away. A few days later, everything was calm again. It was a disaster. It was smelling death everywhere. The dead bodies polluted the water supply. The epidemics caused dozens more deaths.
Shandaya Roy works for the NGO Ganashastha Kendra, one of the largest humanitarian Bangladeshi organizations, more commonly known as GK. This group was the first, 2 days after the cyclone, to arrive at the island of Kutubdia, long before the authorities or any other help.
When I arrived here 2 days after the cyclone, the situation was beyond description. Roads were blocked by trees. There were bodies everywhere. Dead cows, ducks, goats, and of course people. Our objective was to rescue the survivors, but we first had to clear the roads and to bury the dead. At the same time, we provided first aid.
At the time, in Tablachar, there was only one shelter, which had been built by the Bangladeshi Red Crescent. One shelter for 10,000 people.
About 500 of us were crammed in the shelter. People from the neighborhood tried to come in, but there was no place anymore. Many stayed outside.
The 1991 disaster caused a lot of emotion worldwide. Many countries and NGOs financed the building of concrete shelters capable of resisting winds of over 300 kilometers an hour. Today, there are over 600 shelters in the area, 60 of them on the island of Kutubdia. The GK Association built 3 shelters in Kutubdia. One of them was built in Tablachar, and it has a capacity of 3,000 people. In the village, everyone got involved in the project.
The people from Ganashastha Kendra asked us for free land to build a shelter. Some villagers agreed, but others did not. We had a lot of discussions, and finally, we gave them a paddy field. We cleared the field and then it took a year to build the shelter.
এভাবে যখন জায়গাটা দিয়েছি শেল্টারটা প্রায় 1 বছর লেগেছে।
সাইক্লোন শেল্টার বানানোর পরপরই আমরা যেটা ভাবলাম যে এটা তো
Building the shelter was very expensive. We thought it would go derelict if it was not inhabited. So we thought of other uses for it.
আমরা সাইক্লোন সেন্টার ঠিক বলছি না, আমরা বলছি মাল্টিপারপাস কমিউনিটি সেন্টার। তো এখানে আমরা
We set up a school on the ground floor and a medical center on the first floor. We are equipped to provide all the necessary care.
হেলথ সেন্টার হিসাবে যে হেলথ সেন্টারে প্রাথমিক স্বাস্থ্য
We have an outpatient clinic and an 8-bed hospital. Separate care is given to women and to men.
সেপারেট মহিলাদের জন্য পুরুষের জন্য।
We also have a small operation theatre, a laboratory and a maternity ward. With the doctor and the paramedics, we work things out.
প্রাথমিক স্বাস্থ্য ব্যবস্থা এখানে দেওয়া যায়।
নুন এবার উতরে নুন লাগে বুঝছো না কেন হয় এবার দুই আরে তারপরে আপু ফাইকেল গমসাইরা ফাইকেল
We need salt and sugar, but first the container must be clean, then filled with clear water from the pump. Then you can mix it.
মনে করো আর তিন দুনন দোয়া বুঝছো না
Simple rehydration techniques to treat diarrhea, along with the ongoing care of pregnant women, have helped the GK Association decrease significantly child and maternal death rates in Tabluchar.
Every time I get sick, I come here. You can come to the center at any time, even late at night. One time I got diarrhea and I was taken in at 10:30 at night.
The GK provides care for 17,000 people with the help of 1 doctor and 6 medical assistants.
বাচ্চাদের যে ম্যালনিউট্রিশনে যেটা ভুগতো বিশেষ করে
Children suffered from malnutrition. Pregnant women were not receiving any care. Now they get the care and the health situation is much better.
এগুলো আছে অন্যদিকে এডুকেশনের ব্যাপারটা যদি বলি
As for education, this area is particularly deprived.
এডুকেশনটা লিটারেসি রেট ইজ হাই তারপরেও বলবো এই এলাকাটা কুতুবদের একদম এক্সট্রিম দক্ষিণ দিকে
The sheltered school has 255 children who come from the poorest families. Failing the initiative of a multi-purpose shelter, these children would almost certainly never have gone to school, girls in particular. Since 1991, the Red Crescent shelter has also been set up as a school by the government. Nurul Absar, in addition to being a teacher, is a member of the municipal council, an imam, and a volunteer worker for the Red Crescent. Nurul Absar is one of 12 volunteers from the village who meet once a month to discuss the emergency procedures to be followed in case of a cyclone.
There are only 3 shelters in Tablachar for 10,000 people. It's not enough. In case of an alert, we go to the different neighborhoods to ask people to come to the shelters. We accompany old people and we tell people to keep their calm. Everyone prays to God for the cyclone to move away.
The shelter now has a radio transmitter which relays the volunteers from Tablachar to the Cox's Bazar Weather Centre. Since 1991, the meteorologists have had modern equipment at their disposal. Hour by hour, a Japanese satellite tracks changes in the cyclone.
Every hour we send information to Dhaka through our telecommunication networks.
আমাদের টেলিযোগাযোগ ব্যবস্থা আছে, আমাদের ওয়্যারলেস আছে, আমরা প্রতি ঘন্টায় ঘন্টায় আমরা তথ্য দেই। 3 ঘন্টা পর পর আমরা
Every third hour we drop maps
ওয়েদার ম্যাপ ড্র
and
করি,
keep the locals informed of the meteorological developments.
যেটা পূর্বাভাস দেওয়া আমরা এটা এখান থেকে দেই।
The weather reports are most important for the workers at sea. Cox's Bazar is one of the country's largest fishing ports. The Gulf of Bengal swarms with fish. Every day, hundreds of boats unload their catch in Cox's Bazar. Fishing trips can last up to 15 days. The fishermen out at sea are of course exposed to the cyclones. The only way for them to return in case of an alert is to be informed by radio, which they have been legally obliged to have on board since 1991.
We always carry a watch and a radio with us. It's a must. The radio is the only way to be warned of danger when we are out at sea.
On the 15th of May 1997, a cyclone as powerful as the 1991 cyclone struck the region. This time there were 37 victims only. All were fishermen at sea. Most of them didn't have a radio on board. There were no casualties in Tablichar itself, but the devastation was tremendous. The embankment gave way, and the water devastated houses and rice pads alike. Abu Taher, for the third time in 7 years, rebuilds his house near the GK shelter. During the 1997 cyclone, the shelter saved him, his wife, and their 5 children. With each cyclone, the sea overruns more of the island. The only place where Abu Taher and others can settle is right behind the embankment, where it is most dangerous.
It's very, very difficult to live out here, but I can't afford to go anywhere else. I have to stay here, next to the sea, but I'm scared. Where else could I live? My house was over there. It's gone under the sea. I stayed with some people for a while over there. After that, I didn't know where to go, where to live. So finally I settled here.
ঘূর্ণিঝড়ের পর থেকে বারবার আমাদেরকে ঘূর্ণিঝড়ে আক্রমণ করতেছে, হয়তো নিম্নচাপ
Every year, whatever the strength of the cyclone might be, there is always some damage. Our houses are destroyed, trees disappeared, rice crops are ruined because each time the cyclone destroys the deck and the salty water enters the fields.
Economic life is turned upside down in Tablichar. Where a few years ago rice was grown, the fields have now turned into salty marshes. farmers have become seasonal laborers who barely earn enough to survive. Despite considerable damage caused by the 1997 cyclone, during which several 100,000 people became homeless, international organizations hardly mobilized. The much lower number of victims was not enough to attract the attention of donors. Left to their own resort, unable to settle elsewhere in the already overpopulated region, the inhabitants of Tablachar constantly repair the embankment, the only barrier against the sea, and they do this as well as they can.
যেভাবে যাচ্ছে হয়তো যাইতেও পারে কারণ ছোটবেলা থেকে দেখে আসছি
Since I was a child, I have seen parts of the island disappear into the sea.
পশ্চিম দিকে সমুদ্রে চলে যাচ্ছে কিন্তু মনে হয় থাকবে
But I don't think that it will disappear completely
যদি পানিকে
as long as we can build a dig which can really stand up to the water.
Meanwhile, the GK shelter brings safety and comfort to the population. Tablachar's inhabitants can get health care and basic education at low cost. In this area, the GK has financed and built 12 shelters in all. 7 of them are used by the government for the education of secondary school students. The 5 remaining shelters are run by the GK itself, and they house primary schools and health centers. In total, the schools take in 800 pupils, but the shelter coverage of the area remains insufficient.
There is only one shelter here. Obviously, it's not enough. If another cyclone hits with the strength of that of 1991, there will be as many victims and as much suffering.
For a long time to come, fishermen in Tablachar will continue benefiting from the sea's richness. They know that cyclones will hit again. However much remains to be done, for the past 6 years, Bangladesh has found the way to face cyclones with the help of the international community. Never again will a cyclone claim as many lives.